All right, I'm going to go on then and begin my presentation. So what I have planned today is I have a PowerPoint that will sort of guide my explanation of unitive justice. And then I hope to allow a good amount of time afterwards for us to have a discussion about how unitive justice theory and practice might possibly apply or be helpful in what you do, or how it might not be helpful to what you do. I'm really interested in both aspects of that, how practical people find it to be or not. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and start the PowerPoint. Let's see here. Let's see, where is my slideshow? Okay, I want to do a slideshow and I'm not seeing the thing I need to see. Okay, slideshow. All right, from beginning. Okay, there we go. Let me move a couple of things here so I can see. Okay, so this is about unitive justice today, and it is a model of justice that has no punitive elements. So I was formerly a civil trial attorney, and now I am president and executive director of the Alliance for Unitive Justice, which is a nonprofit, and we do training and programs in unitive justice. But I'm also affiliated with a group it's set up as an LLC that is doing unitive justice in prisons. So I wear those two hats. Let's see, let's see. I pushed enter, there we go. Okay, I want to begin by giving you some of the background about how unitive justice originated. So I went to law school, I entered law school in 1970. There was no integrative law then. There was no wellness for lawyers then. It was about go for the jugular, concede nothing. Anyway, so in 2000, when I entered law school, I was told that I would be learning the best legal system that could be designed. Now, at that time, I wasn't tuned in enough to ask the best for whom, despite the fact I only got there when I got over the hurdles of the quotas. So obviously, it was not a system that was designed for women and minorities. So I had competed to get into the men's world for a long time up to that point in my life. And I knew that to be successful there, I had to be at least as good as my male peers and better if I could. So I entered the practice of law. Actually, I entered law school with a 2-month-old baby. And the second baby was born in September after I graduated. And then my husband and I moved to Richmond, Virginia, where we decided neither of us had any contacts or connection there, but we decided that's where we would settle down. I would set up my practice and we would raise our family. And that's what we did. So I was practicing law in Richmond. Now, when I went to apply for jobs, I was told by the law firms that why would they hire me? Nobody wants to be represented by a woman. So in order to practice law, I hung out my shingle. And one nice aspect of that was there was no senior partner to tell me what I couldn't do. So I quickly got involved in the women's movement, which was at its height then, but that's another presentation. Anyway, so I was practicing law, going for the jugular, building my little law practice. And in 1987, on my spiritual journey, I realized there are two models of justice, vengeance and love. I knew what justice as vengeance was because the retributive model of justice is what I learned. It's what I was doing for my clients. I had no idea what justice as love might look like, but I knew that it had to exist. So at that moment, I made a commitment to find out. And 36 years later, now I have a theory for justice as love, which is a model with no punitive elements, and I call it unitive justice. And so this is the basic outline of the theory. And as I started from not knowing at all what I was doing or what I was looking for, I stuck with the book for a while. Well, I continued. I learned a lot from the book, that I got the idea that there was justice as love was a possibility, and that was A Course in Miracles. I don't know if any of you have read it, but anyway, it's an amazing book, and it talks about a world that I didn't have any idea what it was talking about. It was talking about a world I didn't know. But one thing that was very clear to me was that everything it said was consistent. But what it does is it continually says, okay, this is what you have, and this is what you could have. This is what you have, and this is what you could have. You could have punitive justice, or you could have justice as love. So as I was doing this and practicing law, I kept saying, okay, this is what we have. We have this system. And I began to look for the structures in the punitive system. And then when I would find one, I would ask, now, what would be the corresponding structure in a system that you have to fulfill the role? You know, that job has to get done. But what structure would provide that with no punitive elements? And so that's what's come out of this. It's 14 arcs, we call them. It could be more, could be many more, but this is working really well. So it says for security or order, we go from rules to values. For governance, we go from control to self-governance. For communication, we go from deception to honesty. And assessment, we go from judgment to insight, and so on through the whole thing, through the 14 arcs. So that's the basic framework. And it's taken a long time to get here. The last 2 arcs were added after 1987, when I began working with the 2 men who'd been incarcerated that I'm going to speak a lot about. Anyway, so eventually, to sort of make it easier, so how do we create a pedagogy for this and make it so it can be taught? And so we have, they're divided into 2 groups of 7 arcs, sort of the ones that we want to do first to build individual transformation. And then the second ones are more related, although all of them relate to all of it. The second ones are about community transformation, and then we have ones that encompass the whole thing. So in individual transformation, we have from rules to values, from control to self-governance, from deception to honesty, from judgment to insight, distrust to trust, from self-doubt to courage, and then from proportional revenge, harm answers harm, to loving kindness, heal and do no harm. Of course, that last one isn't just an individual transformation. That's really system change, big time. But in each set, we have one sort of encompassing principle. So then we have community transformation, and that is going from self-interest to community, from hierarchy or top-down to equality and inclusion. Not physical equality. This is equality, meaning the equality of our inherent value, our dignity, our personhood. And then from punishment to connection, from compliance to mutually beneficial action and wholeness, from focusing on the event to focusing on the context, from opposition, confrontation that go for the jugular stuff, to synergy, and then from fear to love, which of course, again, is a totally encompassing one. And so when we do training, we go into each one of these and look at look at how each structure works. But an important thing is that all of the structures in the punitive system sustain and support the others. And in the unitive system, each structure also sustains and supports the other. So they're really integrally designed to be self-sustaining and ongoing. And that's how our punitive system, although it doesn't work so well, it's lasted for a long time because it's very precisely designed to endure. And, even when it doesn't work, it's still set up to keep going. Now, this is a clarification. So when a lot of people hear this, they think, oh my goodness, we're going to close the jails, we're going to close the prisons. No, actually, the very opposite is true. So what we're finding is working very well is we don't have to go to the legislature for law changes. We don't have to ask the governor to sign executive orders. All we have to do is begin to build our unitive system. And as it's offered and people choose it for various things, including how to resolve conflict, that system becomes stronger because when they choose that and their conflicts are resolved, not at a superficial level, but in the unitive system, we're looking for the underlying brokenness. And that's what we want to solve. We want to heal the underlying brokenness so the same crimes don't keep being repeated over and over. And as more and more people choose the unitive system, the punitive system just diminishes. So as the punitive system now is the main system, as the unitive system grows, the punitive system will diminish and the unitive system will become more the norm. So that is system change is really what we're about. And it is an intentional process designed to fundamentally alter the components and structures that cause the system to behave in a certain way. Yep, that's exactly what we're seeking to do, to alter the components and structures that cause the system to behave in a certain way. And so when we look at the structures, so inputs and outputs are an important piece of this system change, because when we look at the punitive system and what the inputs are to that system, you know exactly what the outcomes are going to be. The outcomes are always the same. They're just repeated over and over. So when we took our Get Tough on Crime to school systems and applied zero tolerance to the school disciplinary policies, that led to school suspensions and expulsions for all those kids that weren't complying with the rules. And what did that give us? Well, public school to prison pipeline. Yep, that's exactly what it gave us. And so when we changed the inputs, so this is a picture of a circle facilitation training that I was doing at Virginia Union University. And the arrow going from that to a model that was created by a woman who came to Armstrong High School, which you'll hear more about, where we did our first Unitive Justice program. And she talked to everyone she could find who had done a circle process. And then she diagrammed what happened in that process and what the outcome was. It's too small here for you to see, but what it says is the outcome is positive culture change. And that's what we're looking for. And it works. Okay, so when we begin to look at how the punitive system works, it's based on proportional revenge, as I mentioned before, and harm answers harm, because somebody thinks that's some way going to stop harm. And it's an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth justice. And so it's teaching us that the harm I do is moral if it's proportional to the harm done by my enemy. So it's actually teaching us that it's moral and legitimate to harm somebody as long as it's proportional. And so we have language for that we often don't even recognize is talking about proportional revenge. The punishment fits the crime. Yeah, so the punishment is going to be proportional, supposedly, to the crime. And getting even, you get even. That means you're going to do something that gets even for what someone else did. Tit for tat is another term that we use when we're talking about proportional revenge. And so this is, those structures. This is a no contact contract that was used in the school where I was when kids had a fight. And I love this as an example of, it's just screaming out, this is a punitive system. So this no contact contract, students were required to sign after they had a fight. And so it says, I, the student, agree to have no verbal or physical contact with the student I was in the fight with for the remainder of the school year. Now, why do they have to do that? Why does a punitive system have to separate the kids so they don't have any contact with each other? What is that about? And then it says, I further understand that any contact could lead to my suspension from school and or arrest by the police department. Now, why is it that a punitive system has to be set up like that? So I just want to have a little discussion about that. So first of all, this punitive system, they separate the kids. Don't let them talk to each other. And if you do talk to each other, we're going to increase your punishment. Okay, why do they have to separate the kids? Who's got a theory for that?
Maybe it's because it's the easiest quote unquote solution.
So that's correct. But the reason is because they have the punitive system has no means of resolving their conflict. So they had the fight. They're still mad at each other. They haven't done anything about that fact. So what do? They separate them. That's all. And then they say, okay, this is your punishment. And if you disobey this, if this doesn't work for punishment, we're going to do what? We're going to punish you more. We'll suspend you longer, or we'll have you arrested by the police. And why does the punitive system increase the punishment when a little punishment doesn't work? It's the only tool in the toolbox. A punitive system has no tool to enforce compliance other than punishment. And why is that? What is it about a punitive system that requires that it punish people to force them to comply? Any thoughts on that? Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on this. So anyway, it's because it's the only tool in the toolbox. In a punitive system, connection is so undermined that all it can use is force. And so it goes for the force because it's the only tool in the toolbox. Let me get back to this now. Okay. We're going to begin from the current slide. Okay, so that's what this is all about. That's what they do. And do you think it works? How well does that work? Okay, this is a sort of jaw-dropping chart that shows when we started getting tough on crime. Do you remember? We got televisions in a lot of homes. That happened during my lifetime. And then in when Nixon's first election, the politicians started connecting with the pollsters, and they figured out how to get 30-second sound bites they could put on television to mobilize voters. And one of the best ways to do that was to play on our fear of crime. So you might remember the 30-second sound bites that we had, a whole list of them. Abolish parole, 3 strikes, you're out. Truth in sentencing, zero tolerance in schools, all of those. And so they would get elected on these fear-mongering campaign ads. And then when they were elected, they would put them into law. And this is what happened to the rate of incarceration in this country. It has nothing to do with the rate of crime in the country. It has to do with the system, the the politicians were using to get themselves elected. There were some other things, but I think the main one was just that one. Okay, so let's look at some of the what's behind unitive justice. So it's based on loving kindness, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and nonviolence. It takes the position that harming others is not moral, never moral. Answers have to be found, but they're answers that heal. So instead of compounding the harm, they restore and transform. And one of the most succinct and beautiful expressions of this is this quote from Martin Luther King. The ultimate weakness of violence is that it's a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And that is why we're working on justice as love. So in the school I was in, where they had that no contact contract, you saw how they handle a fight. This is how we handled a fight in the Unitive Justice Program. It was called the Restorative Justice Program that we had at Armstrong High School. And so these were two senior girls who were getting into a fight because one girl was gossiping about the others. They hadn't had their fight yet, but they were working up to it. So anyway, the gossip was really hurtful to one of them, and she was ready to take the other one out. And so they come into our circle room, and the one who was angry, she says, I know that I have to, if I get into a fight, I'll go to jail because I've already been in detention and now I'm 18. So if I get into a fight, they'll arrest me and I'll go to jail. But I'm willing to do that if that's what I have to do to stop this. So we get into the circle. We go through the process. We're trying to get to the underlying brokenness. And one thing that happened over and over there was that the students set other students up to fight. And they did that because they found out that was sort of a perfect crime. So if the students wanted to disrupt what was going on in school, which that seemed to be something that they liked to do, they could just promote a fight between students. And when you have a no contact contract, the students could never find out who had manipulated them. But what happened in our circles is they would come in, and one of the first things that they would say is that, well, Tom came and he told me you're going to get your brother and meet me up. And the other one would say, yeah, well, so Tom told me that you were going to get your two brothers and beat me up. And so anyway, so Tom was going back and forth, acting like he was being the friend of these kids. And he was actually boosting the fight, as the kids would say. And then the other students would sort of watch this feud grow, and they would fuel it. And then when the fight would start in their classroom, they'd jump up, they would move the desks out of the way so that they can have the fight right there in the classroom. It was a regular routine that happened over and over. And then they signed the no contact contract, and the kids could never find out that Tom had done this. So they come into our circle process. And how long do you think it took them to find out who set them up for the fight? In the first few minutes. So then from there, when they realized how that had happened, and they start talking about more, what was going on, where the misunderstandings were, they understood, they saw the underlying brokenness that they were caught in. And so when they see that, they can figure out what they need to do about it. We never told them. We didn't have a list of options for what they could do to resolve this. They would figure it out. And so this is what these two girls agreed. They had been friends before this breach occurred. So anyway, they agreed to get along. And they said, the second one was in many of the agreements we did. If we have a misunderstanding, we will sit down in a private area and work it out. So this was the strategy they repeatedly came up with for how they were going to get out of the kids manipulating them and setting them up for a fight. And then they said, we will keep in contact with each other. Not that we won't have contact, but we will keep in contact with each other. And the one young lady who was ready to go to jail, after she went through this, she says, this is so awesome. We need to have an assembly and tell the kids about this. So anyway, I didn't think that was probably possible, but they did agree that they would set an example for other students about getting along. So this is, you have a different input, you have a different output, and that's what this is. So I'm just going to show you some of the information about the Armstrong program. We were there for 2 years, from 2011 to 2013, and it wasn't a full Unitive Justice program like we have now developed. We were just there to do circles, but we did more. When we saw a need in the school, we would work on humanizing the school environment in ways that we were able to do that. Anyway, these are the statistics. Okay. The year before, there were 583 behavior incidents. By the end of our second year, there were 150. That's nearly a 74% reduction. Violations against staff went down 68%. Individual student offenders, the number of offenders, went down over 50%. So the types of incidents against staff, this is just a graph that shows the difference, the red being the year before we started and the purple being the end of our second year. And if we take this out, so this is from the reports that are online by the Virginia Department of Education. For each school, it reports the number of incidents. So when we've taken this out to 2019 to 20, there has never been a year since we were there when the number of incidents has been as low as it was the year we were there. And there could be other factors, but while we were there, it went down to 150, and as soon as we left, it immediately went back up. Okay, this is a larger picture. So we were really blessed that a PhD student came from Illinois to do her research on our Armstrong program. And as I mentioned, she interviewed all the people she could find and found what they were getting out of it when it didn't work, what have you. And so this is the model that she did of what happened in our program and how the outcome generally was a positive culture or climate shift. And so I also was teaching Unitive Justice theory there, and I taught, since I was in a high school, the students were old enough, I taught some of them how to do the circle process. One of our partners was a group here called Communities in Schools, and they run a GED program in a lot of the high schools. And since they were our grant partner, I was asked to be particularly involved in their program. So I was working with the students, not the ones who were in the Honor Society, but the ones who were in this program to get their GEDs. And so anyway, this is the amazing thing about Unitive Justice, is when Unitive Justice begins to take hold, those who were the problem can become the solution. So as this became implemented, and you will see this, as the students learned about it and learned practical ways to implement it, the students become the agents of the school culture change. So I hope this works. I said it, my sound should work. Okay, there were students from Virginia Commonwealth University who came on a project. They made this video of students who were in my class, and it was for their class. But anyway, as a result of that, we had this wonderful record of what 4 of the students in my class say about it.
You can start by telling us what you think of the restorative justice program and how it's beneficial.
Okay, I mean, it's going to benefit a lot of people because it shows that you don't always have to show an eye for an eye. You can always be forgiven for something that you did. So I think it'll benefit a lot of people and help kids grow up and know that you don't always have to get somebody back for doing what they did.
We just sit down and do circles and just talk our problems out instead of going to jail or prison, letting it escalate when you can just talk it out in a circle and get all your feelings out. And nobody judge you or say anything bad or negative about it. You just sit down and talk your feelings out with the person that you have problems with. Training is kind of difficult when you start it because being a facilitator, you don't get to judge. You can't say anything negative about the situation.
Like, people wouldn't just go to jail. People would, like, be able to apologize. People would be able to hear them or what they had to say or why did they do what they did or where was the mistake or misunderstanding or something that stops the problem before it escalates.
I actually did a circle where I actually trained to do a circle, and I learned how to do it, and me and my friends, we played around with it, but then there was a real conflict in the classroom, so me and my other friend that was in the restorative justice program, we both really solved a conflict by ourselves.
Okay, so that was the first opportunity we ever had to apply unitive justice. And after being at Armstrong, I taught unitive justice in education at Virginia Commonwealth University School of Education for a number of years. And I also taught at Virginia Union University, one of the historic Black universities. When I was teaching in the School of Education, I would do professional development classes for teachers and administrators from schools. They would come to get their professional development credits. And so they would come from a bunch of different schools, and I would teach it, and, they would respond very positively to it. And then they would go back to their school, and there'd only maybe be 2 or 3 who had the training, and it wasn't enough to actually take root. So it was having a little impact. So we decided we would change the model, and we would instead train a team of teachers and school administrators. We would train the staff how to change the school culture. So it didn't depend upon us being there. So this year we have 2 pilot programs doing that. We are teaching an online course in 2 schools in Hopewell, Virginia, one in the Hopewell High School, one in the Hopewell Middle School. And we have a team of about 10 staff members in each of those classes. So they're learning the unitive justice theory. We're giving them the tools for how you implement this in a school. And we have done 2 quarters. It's going very well, I believe. And I think that this is a better model. And then this amazing thing happened. Sarah Daves, who is one of our certified unitive justice trainers, she connected over the internet with a woman who was running a school in Uganda. And the woman told Sarah Daves, you need to come here and teach this to us in Uganda. And Sarah did. So Sarah is in Uganda. Amazing story. They built the school. It was up and running in February of this year. And I mean, it's built in a little village. The kids, in Uganda, apparently you have to pay to go to school. This is a free school. In Uganda, apparently the kids are caned often, and many kids drop out of school because of the canings, but they're also caned at home. So in this school, they're not caned. If there's a conflict, they circle up. The kids are learning this, and Sarah is teaching all of the staff to be unitive justice practitioners. And she's also teaching a group of community leaders how unitive justice works. And so what's happening there is really, there aren't even words for it. It's totally amazing. And then we come to unitive prison culture change. So I was doing this mainly in schools, but thinking about it, the theory was developing, the arcs were being, worked on. it was sometimes hard to find the right word for what would be the structure in unitive justice that would be the parallel to what was in the punitive ones. But we've got that worked out pretty well. So then in 2018, I happened to meet Paul Taylor, who now goes by Taylor Paul, and Weldon Princebun. So Taylor and Prince, when I met them, they were doing, so when I met, Paul had been out of prison about 1.5 years, and Prince had been out 11 weeks. And so they were doing work in the community, and I was at Virginia Union University, the Black, historic Black university, and I had tried to get my students who were in the criminology and criminal justice department into some of the projects so that they could do circle work. We tried it and it didn't work because they didn't trust me. So we know that. I showed up at the old white lady. They were going to trust me. But my students were studying to be police officers. They were studying criminal law. So they didn't trust them either. So we needed someone who would open the door for us into the community. So I heard these two men say a little bit about their background and that they were now working in the community. So I said, okay, they're my door openers. So I met with them. We got together. And as soon as they began telling me that they had transformed the prison culture while they were in prison and telling me what they did, I totally recognized what they did. They had figured out justice as love in the prison setting, all on their own. They didn't know about the Quakers. They didn't know about unitive justice. They didn't know about any of this. But what they did know was they had life plus 26 and life plus 80-year prison sentences. And if they didn't do something different, they would die in prison. And they decided that wasn't going to happen. And it was before Virginia abolished parole. So even though they had these lengthy sentences, they still were eligible for parole. So they decided to just reverse what they were doing in the prison. And they started, it's so brilliant what they did. They started with self-governance. So before I met them, from control to self-governance was not one of the arcs, but it is. Now this is Paul Taylor, now Taylor Paul. And I'm just going to show you a little of this because it's too long to show all of it. But he is telling how they started to teach. So they were in a prison pod and they were teaching a cognitive community program there. So they were already outstanding inmates to begin with. But then they started notching it up because they were going to get out of prison by proving that they deserved to get out. So they got the idea. Paul actually came up with this idea. They had to begin with self-governance. And he's going to tell you a little bit about that. And then I'm going to explain more about what I learned from them about this.
And while on the inside, you know, they call it.
Oh, wait. Sorry about that.
The Department of Corrections or the DOC. Well, Prince and I call it, the DNC, meaning the department needs correction. So while on the inside, we started thinking of, okay, well, how can we change this in here and get the punitive foot off of our back? So we said, well, the first thing we have to do is, make sure the men understand you have to take responsibility for yourself. First of all, your actions. Rehabilitation doesn't come from being locked up an X amount of time. Rehabilitation comes for, as Prince will tell you, that long walk to the mirror where you say to yourself, you know what? I was wrong. And then from that point is when it begins. And then you start finding what we coined the term radical tenderness. We use radical tenderness inside of the prisons to reach a demographic of individuals that had so many different backgrounds. And when I say different backgrounds, I'm not talking about one was from maybe Africa, or one was a Sudanese, or one was from Pakistan, or one was from Israel, or one was from none of that. I'm talking about gang members, where they have their own constitution. We know that you're the Constitution of the United States. We know the police constitution. We know state constitutions. But we're talking about where they had their own constitution, where Bloods, Crips, Gangster Disciples, MS-13, all types of rival gangs were inside of one pod. And Prince and I were in charge of making a gumbo. And well, he said, we're going to go to the commissary. Prince, you get the rice. I said, I'm going to get a couple cans of sardines or mackerel, and we're going to make a meal. And the first thing that we did was put a big sign up, and some of you may have heard this story, but I love telling it. We put a big sign up that said self-govern. We knew that we had to take the punitive element out of the punitive process. We had to take the punitive power from our captives and those that utilize, because we have some great people inside of the department, don't get me wrong. And one of them are joining us right now. Say your name, say your name.
Andrea.
Right? So one of them are joining us right now. That you have some people that truly believe in us on the inside, but not everyone is invested. No. You have some overzealous correctional officers that will come around and give you infractions for minute circumstances. Mm-hmm. So we said, well, how can we change this narrative? Well, we said, well, if we get up in the morning and they say, have your bunks made up by 8 o'clock, no problem. Have your box pushed under? No problem. Tuck your shirt in before you leave the building? No problem. Have your ID on your left lapel? No problem. Mm-hmm. We started to find out, okay, we can take their strong hand or their strong suit, if you know anything about spades. We can take their strong suit and make it ours. So we just took the power from them. Mm-hmm. Because it's the same thing in society. We realize that if I get inside of my automobile and I don't buckle up, then I'm having a circumstance. When I was looking at some of the General Assembly policies that were going to be passed in January 1st, such as you can no longer ride with a handheld cell phone in your hand because you can get stopped, I immediately sent that through the returning citizen wire. Mm-hmm. Because I don't want to give them no reason to use their punitive system on us. Mm-hmm. Again, trial and error. Mm-hmm. So prison for us was a teachable moment. So during that moment, we decided to use it as a teachable moment. And while on the inside.
So anyway, that was Paul describing how they came up with self-governance is where they began, but they did a lot of other things. So anyway, when I talked to them, and what they were doing, as I said, I totally recognized that they were implementing justice as love in a prison. So we eventually decided to record them talking about how they transformed the prison culture, and we would use unitive justice theory as the pedagogy. So we use 6 of the arcs, and it's over 30 videos, short videos that we use in the prison training program, with Paul and Prince describing all of these, going from rules to values, going from dishonesty to honesty, the 6 arcs that we use. And this was one of our recording sessions. We had many of them, one of them. Okay, now then, let's see. This is, this is a video that we did, one of our videos. Whoops, sorry. What did I do here? I pushed the wrong button. What happened?
Unitive Prison Culture Change is a course for men and women who are incarcerated. Prince Bunn and I, 2 men who walk this talk during our own incarceration, are going to tell you what we did to change everything. That trip from being on the opposite side of right to being leaders, first in prison and now in our communities. We are doing this because we need you out here. In the communities where we used to be the problem, we can be the solution. You are the solution. Those of us who were offenders but turned that all around, we are the credible voices for this message. This is the key. We figured out that being on the side of right is not so bad after all.
Paul and I have a lot to share. So to organize it, we've made these lessons about 5 principles for creating prison culture change that work for us. Each principle points out something that needs to change and what we can do instead. The 5 principles are self-governance, values, honesty, insight, and community. We will cover one principle in each lesson.
We know these principles work because this is how we proved we were worthy of going back into society. That's what we want for you too. We know if you can apply these same 5 principles, it will set you on a path to a new beginning, a fresh start, just like they did for us.
If you follow these principles while you are incarcerated, you will be making good use of that time. You will be preparing to apply these principles in the communities you are returning to. Imagine the difference we can make if we do this together.
Wait, okay. Okay, so that gives you a flavor of the program. And we began teaching this, our pilot program. I'm teaching it in a prison. We started in May. This morning, I taught my 6th class. And we sit in a circle in a room at the prison. And we have these battery-run candles in the center of the room. I told them that was to signify that we're in a sacred space. And this is the handbook. So we have lessons. So in the video, they talked about 5 principles. It then became 6. So now it's actually 6 because we added courage. I felt that the more I worked with them and the more I worked with this material, in the videos, they never once mentioned the word courage, but courage was present throughout. And I said, we have to have from self-interest, from self-doubt to courage as one of the principles. So it's now 6. And it's not 5 lessons. It was going to be 5 lessons. We were going to do it in about 5. We were going to do it in maybe 5 months, putting this program together. It's now 20 lessons, over 30 short videos, and it took us 3 years. So we're just now implementing it. And out of it has come a criminology theory. Yeah, so I found out doing this that there's a whole movement in criminology called positive criminology or therapeutic criminology, what have you. So I started reading about it because as I worked with Paul and Prince, I saw there was a pattern in what they did that's replicable. You know, there was a theory in what they did. So I started looking at the positive criminology theories, and it was very interesting. They were academics and people who maybe worked in prisons. Most of them, they came from academics though. And every one of them had a better plan for how to fix those people. And the thing that I saw that was happening in what Paul and Prince were teaching was they were teaching those people to be the fix. So unitive justice criminology theory is about predicting the conditions and circumstances under which those people who are incarcerated can become the solution to the problems they used to cause. Anyway, these are some things that I think are important to it, that it's peer-to-peer, although I'm teaching it now. It's not being taught now by inmates, but we hope that it will. It has to be non-hierarchical, non-judgmental, and non-punitive to be unitive. And it's asset-focused, but to a new degree. It just doesn't assume that we're going to build on the positive, the positive characteristics. It assumes that the inmates themselves are capable of leading punitive system reform in the jails and prisons where they are incarcerated. That's the basic principle. And it's based on 6 principles, as I said. It is not a Band-Aid. It is system change. And so this is our dream. I showed you before the chart where they got tough on crime and it just escalated. This is that chart turned upside down. So if we can get unitive justice, prison culture change in enough prisons and jails, we think this is what will happen. This is another schemata of this is only the positive arcs, the unitive arcs in this. And so it was mentioned before, there's the first Unitive Justice International Conference in Richmond and live stream, October 2nd through 4th. And at it, everything in all the ways that we're applying unitive justice, which includes in religion and spirituality, in a short one on politics, that's not very developed yet, but we have to get unitive justice politics, unitive justice leadership. We have people coming from 3 continents and the Philippines. 2 people and Sarah are coming from their school in Uganda to tell us about that. And Paul and Prince will be there, and our filmmaker will be there, and I'm very excited about it, as you might note. So if you go to a4uj.org, the homepage for the Alliance for Unitive Justice, we have a conference website, and you can connect to it there. So with that, okay, we have maybe 20 minutes for questions and answers and thoughts about how this might be applicable or not applicable to whatever you're doing. Who would like to begin?
Jump in, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Well, thank you so much. This is incredibly, incredibly informative and also inspiring. And having worked with Sarah and Namunga and seeing the great work that they've done, Aubrey, jump in if you want to. I mean, there's such a beautiful correlation with the conscious contract process that we work on, that we work with with the clients. And I loved looking at the arc, so I started to look at that a little bit more closely when we were working with the students, because we're really. It's a similar concept in the contracting that we're trying to do, where we're really looking at the relationship and building the trust, and that comes from looking at your own values and then aligning values, and there's just such a lot of similarities that I think it has a lot of implication to that process as well. And for me, having seen this in the school, and I have a 15-year-old daughter in high school, and I have 2 sons that are out of high school, I just see such a need for it, especially in this culture where this cancel culture that kids do, and how we're not taught how to deal with conflict, right? We're not taught how to communicate. I think those videos with the students, I want to use those and show those at like a high school thing. That there's so many practical applications that we could be, helping students in high schools or younger, as we've seen. I guess though, one of my questions is sort of, what are the challenges? I mean, I can imagine, but the challenges to bring about that change. I mean, it's as you said, a systematic change. And I can hear, people, I can hear in my head, all the reactions. I was really glad to hear when Paul said it's about taking responsibility for your actions, right? Because I think sometimes people have this idea like, oh, no punishment, you did something wrong. So I guess I'm curious on the challenges and how you've worked through those. And I'm sure I'll learn a lot more about it at the conference. I know there's probably...
So there are several challenges. We were at Armstrong High School for 2 years. And then that was 2010 to 2011 to 2013. And in Virginia, restorative justice was very new then. And so we had a man who was our champion. He was in the City Department of Justice, and he got us into Armstrong. And then when he left, the next director said that what we were doing was mission creep. It wasn't under their agencies. It wasn't what they were doing. And so many restorative justice programs ended that way. They lost their champion, and the next person got rid of it as fast as they could. I think that that's changing now, though. So I'll tell you now what our biggest hurdles are is funding. So that whole prison program that we're now doing, we have done with absolutely no funding. It's just total commitment that we have done it. And that's not sustainable. I mean, we have to get, to go. And another thing about the funding is capacity. We have to be able to hire the best people to do this. And that requires money. And now we simply don't have that. We've been focused on developing the program. We're now testing it. But now we need to bring in some new skills. Those of us who've been doing this, we don't have the fundraising skills.
Right.
And Sarah's turning people out of her program who, if we can hire, they can do this work. So if we can get the funding, Sarah is amazing. Sarah has become she's our trainer. I mean, if we're going to hire someone, we just go to graduates from Sarah's class. They spend a year with her. They come out, they understand all of this. They create things that I couldn't think of. And I'll tell you what, this is not a hard sell. When people experience it, when people experience it, it's not complicated. They see it. And so people need to know about it. We need to tell them we're not going to get rid of jails and prisons. The thing of it is, we're going to use the prisons and jails in a different way. It takes time for individual transformation, and inmates have time. They're addicted to drugs in prison because there's nothing to do, nothing affirming their value or self-worth. So we really want to use the time in prison. They can keep arresting them, send them to criminal court, send them to prison. Just let us in the jails and prisons. And as they come out and they go back to their communities, we believe that we can dry up the numbers that are going in on the other end of the system.
Right.
Yeah. So it's really, it's amazing. The opportunities are really amazing. Okay. Now, can we hear from the two people? Julia and Sweva, I know I'm going to pronounce it again wrong. Anyway, in South Africa. What's your thoughts on it? Are you with us? So if they aren't, I will share with those of you that are present my experience this morning at the prison. I'm still trying to process it. So we did 4 classes on self-governance, and they got that. That was easy. Okay, we don't want the guards on our neck. So what we really need to do is we just self-govern. And they get that in different classes that they have. So that was cool. Today we began going from rules to values. That is major stuff. That's really a big change. And some of them were really certain that what we need are rules that are more harshly enforced. And when people, recognize what the consequences are going to be, they're going to comply. And I said, well, why hasn't that worked yet? But one thing I realized is I got to fix my training manual. I have to introduce this much better than I did. But so we did an exercise today. Our first exercise was a reflective listening exercise. And I wanted to get them more attuned to values. What do values really mean? How do you feel when you're dealing with values? So we did a reflective listening exercise where they shared a time when someone was kind to them, and what type of kindness was it? Was it trust? Was it generosity? What was it? And then share a time when you were kind to someone else. So they did that in pairs, and I shared myself with an inmate to get the numbers to work. And so in doing this, and then they reported on the experience of doing that. So by my sixth lesson, I know there's a lot of goodness in that room. And I'm looking for the teachers who will teach this after this class, after they've had the 20 classes. But today, when they talked about times when people were kind to them and times where they were kind to others, this is what I'm still trying to process. I've worked for many years, railing against the punitive system, and now I'm present to the people who are in that system. I'm present to their humanity. That's big. Yeah, it's impacting me. So, anyway, so any comments on that or anything else? Any other questions?
I just admitted somebody that has been to previous classes, but
Right.
I'm not sure that you've met him. I do want to make a quick comment though, or a question. Both. I think it's amazing that you saw what was broken in the system and went about your own way to make it better. I love that, and I find that extremely admirable. My question though is, obviously I'm still a student, so I do plan on using my law degree and would like to do something in a legal capacity as an attorney, but how can I incorporate unitive justice as an attorney? You've mentioned how you can do it outside and that you're not doing it currently as an attorney, but do you see any ways it can be used as an attorney?
So Kim has a whole encyclopedia of knowledge about that and how people are doing it. So at our conference, we have 2 days on unitive justice, and then we have a post-conference, which is on the transformation of the legal system. I left the legal system after 28 years. But there are people who are working in the legal system to change it from within. And so we have 6 people from 2 continents and the Philippines who will be talking about how they are working within the system to change it. And so it will really depend upon where the doors open. What are the opportunities for you? And there is no way I could possibly predict that. But you're being exposed to it, and you're working, with Sarah's group. And so as you learn about it, I have to tell you that this is bigger than any of us. That I would have met Paul and Prince. What are the chances of that happening? I had been working on this for many years when I met them, and they had been working on it too for many years at the opposite end of the system. And how did we meet? I think just be open, and your path will open. It'll be there for you. Just trust. Yeah, this is bigger than us.
As an attorney, I am type A and very much a control freak. So giving over control like that really gives me, some heartache, but I will trust the process and go on my journey. Thank you.
Okay. I'll tell you, it's a learning process that never ends. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else who we can't see? Do any of you have any things you'd like to share or questions you would like to ask? No? So, anything else anyone else wants to add? Maybe we'll just close a few minutes early here. Kara, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you for sharing about that exchange on the reflections. And I think what came up for me is, you know, it's been 3 years that I've sort of found the integrative law movement, and the thing that that bringing that humanity, seeing that humanity, you know, it's definitely not something that we were taught in law school, and to be able to hold that space, you know, is a real skill that all attorneys would really benefit from, right? To hold that space, to see that humanity, and to really understand the interconnectedness, you know, of everything. So that oneness. And you know, we talked about it a lot in our clinic, right, Aubrey, on holding that space, and you've had experience doing that, and that's it's really it's a skill, and it's a human skill, you know, that yeah, and it's something amazing to experience. And thank you for sharing that. It really touched me.
Great, thank you. So, how, you know, what obstacles do you see in doing this?
Yeah, you know, I think that you're saying, like, when people see it, when they see it work, then you can bring them on. But it's sort of getting past that hurdle oftentimes, even in with the conscious contract, you know, where we're going for that paradigm shift, right? We're trying to say, yeah, we know you want this, you want the terms and conditions, you just want a contract, you just want it fast. But you know, to try and open people's eyes up to doing the upfront work, to building the trust, to communication, right? We're not taught how to communicate, really. To getting them to sort of buy in so that they can see how it works. It's a little chicken and egg, right? You know.
Yeah, it definitely is. Now, I use the term experience how it works. I think it's experiential learning.
Yes.
That's a hurdle.
Yeah.
Is that you can't understand justice as love until you experience it. Until then, you know, when you're in duality consciousness, it's not something that's rational, possible. But when you experience it, you know it's very real. Yeah. So, all right. Anyone else like to add anything? Aubrey, you got anything you want to add?
I just appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. I am looking forward to hearing more about it at the conference in October. I think it's such a great facet of the integrative law movement, and I'm happy to be part of it.
Yeah, well, one thing I might mention is that the Unitive Justice is clearly under the integrative law movement, but it's also under the restorative justice movement, which is under integrative law. The significant difference between unitive justice and restorative justice, I believe, is that unitive justice has a concrete theory, and restorative justice lacks a concrete theory, and so therefore it sort of gets used, you know, in different ways. And in the state of Virginia, under our new governor, isolation in prison is now called restorative housing. And so there's no clear definition that says that isn't. And so, but I find that having the theory is really the key. The theory is the key. And so I'm done adding arcs. This is what we're going to go with. So, okay. Well, if no one else has, okay, there was a share from Julia. Okay. Well, thank you all. I appreciate you all coming. and sticking with me to the end. And I hope that you will check out the conference if you're not already registered to go. It's going to be very exciting. And at a time when the world really needs what integrative law and unitive justice and restorative justice and all these things can bring to it. Okay, so thank you very much for this opportunity. And until we meet again.